The phone call came at 2 a.m., a jagged interruption to the quiet of my Seattle apartment. My father's voice, usually steady as a ship's anchor, trembled through the receiver. "Elliot, I need you to come to California. It's important." I was 24, freshly out as gay to a family that didn't know how to process it, and Dad, stoic, ex-military, small-town mechanic, hadn't spoken to me in months. I booked the first flight to San Diego, my mind racing with questions. Was he sick? Was it Mom? The silence between us since my coming out had been a chasm, but his voice carried an urgency that pulled me across it. When I landed, the coastal air hit me like a wave, salty and sharp, and there he was at baggage claim. Tom Harris, 52, broad-shouldered, his graying buzz cut glinting under the airport lights. His eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something I couldn't name. "Elliot," he said, his voice gruff but soft. "We're going on a road trip, just you and me." I froze. A road trip? With Dad, who'd barely said 10 words to me since I told him I was gay. But there was no time to argue. He tossed my bag into his beat-up Ford pickup, and we were off, heading north along the Pacific Coast Highway. The ocean stretched endless on our left, cliffs rising on our right, and the silence in the cab was heavier than the California sun. "Dad, what's this about?" I finally asked, my voice barely above the hum of the engine. He gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. "I need to understand you, son, and maybe you need to understand me." That night, we stopped at a small motel in Santa Barbara, the kind with flickering neon signs and threadbare carpets. The clerk, a tired woman in her 60s, handed us a single key. "Only one room left," she said, "and it's got one bed." Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I felt my stomach twist. Sharing a bed with my father, the man who'd once called my identity a phase? This was going to be a disaster. We dropped our bags in the room, a cramped space smelling of salt and old wood. The bed was a queen barely big enough for two. I offered to take the floor, but Dad shook his head. "We're adults, Elliot. We'll manage." His voice was firm, but there was a crack in it, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. As we lay there, the inches between us felt like miles. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant crash of waves. Then, out of the dark, he spoke. "I was 24 once. Did I ever tell you about Diego?" My breath caught. Diego? Dad had never mentioned anyone by that name. I turned my head, barely able to see his silhouette in the dim light. "No," I said cautiously. "Who's Diego?" He was quiet for so long I thought he'd changed his mind. Then, slowly, he said, "He was someone I met in the Navy. Someone who made me question everything I thought I knew about myself." My heart stopped. My father, the man who'd spent his life in flannel and grease-stained overalls, who'd married Mom at 22 and raised me in a town where different was a dirty word. Was he saying what I thought he was? "Dad," I whispered, "are you?" "Not now." He cut me off, his voice thick. "But back then I didn't know what to do with it. I ran from it, and I've been running ever since." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I wanted to ask more, to push, but something in his tone told me to wait. Instead, I lay there, my mind spinning. My father, the man I thought I knew, had a secret. And for the first time, I realized this trip wasn't just about me. It was about him, too. The next morning, we hit the road again, the conversation from the night before hanging unspoken between us. Dad's hands were steady on the wheel, but his eyes kept darting to the horizon, like he was searching for something. We stopped at a diner in Big Sur, a quirky place with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox playing old Springsteen. Over greasy eggs and coffee. I worked up the courage to ask, "What happened with Diego?" Dad's fork paused midair. He set it down, his gaze fixed on the table. "He was my bunkmate," he said finally. "We were stationed in San Diego, early 90s. He was different. Loud, confident, always laughing. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room." His voice softened, and I saw something I'd never seen before, a flicker of longing in his eyes. "We got close," he continued. "Too close, maybe. One night, after a few drinks, he kissed me, and I didn't stop him." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, raw and unguarded. "But I was scared, Elliot. Scared of what it meant, of what people would think. So I pushed him away, transferred to another base. Never saw him again. I didn't know what to say. My father, the man who'd raised me to be tough, had loved a man, had run from it. The weight of his confession settled over me, heavy but strangely comforting. We weren't so different after all." That afternoon, we hiked a trail along the cliffs, the ocean roaring below. Dad walked ahead, his shoulders squared, but there was a new softness to him, like a wall had started to crumble. "I don't want you to make my mistakes," he said suddenly, turning to face me. "I don't want you to run from who you are." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time I felt seen, not just as his son, but as me, Elliot, the man who loved men. "I'm trying not to," I said, my voice breaking. "But it's hard when the people you love don't understand." He stepped closer, his hand resting on my shoulder. "I'm trying, son. I'm trying." That night, we didn't talk about Diego again, but something had shifted. The bed in the next motel felt less like a battleground and more like a bridge. As we lay there, I thought about Diego, about the life Dad might have had if he hadn't run. And I wondered if this trip was his way of making peace with it, or if it was something more. The road stretched on, winding through Monterey's misty coastline, the air thick with pine and salt. Dad was quieter today, his confessions from the night before lingering like fog. I didn't push him, but every glance he threw my way felt like a question he wasn't ready to ask. We stopped at a small beach town, Pacific Grove, where pastel-colored houses hugged the shore. Dad wanted to walk the pier, so we did, our footsteps clunking against the weathered boards. Below, seals barked, their sleek bodies cutting through the waves. I caught Dad smiling at them, a rare, unguarded moment. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't left Diego?" I asked, my voice soft but deliberate. He stopped walking, his hands gripping the railing. "Every damn day," he said, his voice barely audible over the ocean's roar. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I didn't know how to be that version of myself. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. Growing up in our small Washington town, I'd felt the same suffocating pressure to be someone I wasn't. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I regret hurting him, and I regret what it did to me. But if I hadn't run, I wouldn't have your mom. Or you." His voice cracked, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. That night, we checked into another motel, this one overlooking the cliffs. One bed again. Apparently, the universe had a sense of humor. As we settled in, Dad didn't hesitate this time. He climbed in beside me, the mattress creaking under his weight. "You okay with this?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. "Yeah," I said, surprised at how true it felt. The awkwardness was fading, replaced by a fragile trust. In the dark, he spoke again. "When you came out, I didn't handle it well. I know that. I was scared again. Scared I'd failed you somehow. You didn't fail me, I said quickly. You just didn't know me. Not really. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm starting to. The next day, we drove to San Francisco, the city sprawling before us like a promise. Dad seemed lighter, almost eager, as we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge. I came here once with Diego, he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. We walked the Castro, back when it was the heart of everything. Felt like another world. I tried to picture it. My father, young and unsure, in a place where love didn't have to hide. Did you feel free there? I asked. He hesitated. For a moment. Then I got scared again. He glanced at me. You ever been? I shook my head. Not yet. But I want to. He nodded like he was filing that away. We spent the day exploring Chinatown's bustling markets, the steep hills of Nob Hill. At a small cafe, we sat across from each other, and I noticed how his hands, rough from years of fixing cars, trembled slightly as he held his coffee. Elliot, he said, I need to tell you something else, about why I called you. My stomach tightened. What is it? He took a deep breath. I found Diego on the internet a few months ago. He's here in San Francisco, and I reached out. My jaw dropped. You what? I didn't know what else to do, he said, his voice raw. After you came out, I kept thinking about him, about what I threw away. I needed to make it right. I didn't know whether to be angry or amazed. Are you meeting him? He nodded slowly. Tomorrow, and I want you to come with me. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Meet Diego, the man who'd shaped my father's past, who'd haunted him for decades. I didn't know if I was ready for that, but the look in Dad's eyes, hopeful, terrified, determined, told me he wasn't doing this alone. That night, in yet another motel with a single bed, I couldn't sleep. Dad's breathing was steady beside me, but my mind raced. What would Diego be like? Would he hate Dad for what happened? Would he even show up? And what did this mean for us? For me and Dad, for the family we'd been trying to hold together. Morning came too fast. We drove to a small park in the Castro, where Diego had agreed to meet. Dad was quiet, his hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. When we arrived, the park was alive with color. Rainbow flags fluttering, couples walking hand in hand. I saw a man sitting on a bench, maybe 50, with warm brown skin and a kind smile. He stood as we approached, his eyes locking onto Dad's. Tom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Diego, Dad replied, and for a moment, they just stood there, two men carrying decades of what-ifs. I stepped back, giving them space. Diego's eyes flicked to me, curious but warm. You must be Elliot, he said, extending a hand. Your dad's told me about you. I shook his hand, my throat tight. Nice to meet you, I managed. They sat on the bench and I wandered a few steps away, pretending to study a nearby mural. But I could hear snippets of their conversation. Apologies, laughter, moments of silence heavy with meaning. Dad's voice broke once, and I saw Diego reach out, resting a hand on his arm. It was a small gesture, but it carried a weight I couldn't fully grasp. When they finally stood, Dad's face was different, lighter, like he'd let go of something he'd been carrying too long. Diego hugged him, then turned to me. Take care of him, okay? He said, his smile genuine. I will, I promised. As we drove away, Dad didn't say much, but he didn't need to. The air between us felt clearer, like we'd both crossed a threshold we couldn't come back from. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just his son. I was his ally. The drive back down the coast was quieter, but not the heavy silence of before. Dad's hands were looser on the wheel, his shoulders less tense. Meeting Diego had changed something in him, and I could feel it rippling into me, too. We stopped at a small beach in Half Moon Bay, the sand cool under our feet as we walked toward the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment, we just stood there, side by side, watching the waves. "Did you get what you needed from him?" I asked finally, my voice soft against the sound of the tide. Dad nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Closure, I guess, and permission to move forward. He turned to me, his expression raw. I spent so long ashamed of who I was back then. Seeing him, hearing he's happy now, it makes me think I can be, too. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. "You deserve that, Dad." He looked at me, his eyes glistening. "So do you, Elliot." That night, we found another motel, another single bed. By now, it felt almost normal, the closeness no longer a barrier but a comfort. As we lay there, Dad spoke into the dark. "When I saw Diego today, I realized something. I've been so focused on my own regrets, I forgot to see you. Really see you." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice steady but warm, "you're braver than I ever was, coming out, living your truth even when it was hard. I'm proud of you, son." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I'd waited my whole life to hear those words, and now they were here, in a cramped motel room with the ocean humming outside. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. The next day, we drove to Santa Cruz, the boardwalk alive with lights and laughter. Dad insisted we ride the roller coaster, something we hadn't done together since I was a kid. As we climbed into the rickety car, he grinned, a real unguarded grin, and for a moment, I saw the man he might have been if fear hadn't held him back. Afterward, we sat on a bench, eating cotton candy and watching kids dart through the crowd. "You ever think about settling down?" Dad asked, his tone casual but curious. I laughed, caught off guard. "What, like marriage?" He shrugged. "Yeah, or whatever you want your life to look like." I thought about it, the idea of a future where I could love openly, without fear. "Someday," I said, "but it's hard to imagine when I'm still figuring out who I am." He nodded like he understood. "You've got time. Just don't wait as long as I did to be honest with yourself." His words stayed with me as we continued south, the coastline unfolding like a story we were both writing together. In Pismo Beach, we stopped at a small bar overlooking the ocean, the kind of place where locals and tourists mingled under string lights. As we sipped beers, a guy about my age caught my eye from across the room. He was 26, maybe, with tousled dark hair and a shy smile. I glanced at Dad, half expecting disapproval, but he just raised an eyebrow and nodded toward the guy. "Go say hi," he said. I laughed, nervous. "You serious?" "Dead serious," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Life's too short, Elliot." So I did. His name was Javier, a graphic designer from LA with a laugh that made my stomach flip. We talked for hours, Dad watching from the bar with a quiet smile. When Javier asked for my number, I hesitated, glancing at Dad. He gave me a small nod, and I felt a rush of gratitude. For the first time, I wasn't hiding who I was. Not from him, not from myself. That night, in our shared bed, I couldn't stop smiling. "You okay with me talking to him?" I asked, half joking. Dad chuckled, a low, warm sound. "Kid, I just want you to be happy, whoever that's with." The next morning, Javier texted me, inviting us to a bonfire on the beach that night. I showed Dad the message, expecting him to balk, but he just said, "Sounds fun. Let's go." The bonfire was magic. Flames crackling, waves crashing, and Javier's hand brushing mine as we sat on a driftwood log. Dad sat a little ways off, talking to some locals, but every now and then, he'd glance over, his expression soft. I realized he wasn't just giving me space. He was watching me live the life he hadn't let himself have. As the fire died down, Javier leaned closer, his voice low. "Your dad's pretty cool, you know?" I smiled, my heart full. "Yeah, he's getting there." The bonfire's warmth lingered in my chest as we drove back to our motel. The night air cool and sharp. Dad was humming an old rock tune, something he hadn't done in years. I glanced at him, his profile lit by the dashboard glow, and felt a swell of something new, hope, maybe, or trust. Javier's number burned in my pocket, a small promise of something I hadn't let myself want before. "You like him," Dad said, not a question. I blushed, caught off guard. "Maybe. He's nice." Dad nodded, his eyes on the road. "Good. You deserve nice." The words were simple, but they hit hard. For so long, I'd felt like I had to prove I deserved anything at all: love, acceptance, a place in the world. Now, here was my father, the man who'd once turned away from my truth, telling me I deserved it. That night, the motel bed felt like a sanctuary. As we lay there, I asked, "What's next for you, Dad? After all this?" He was quiet for a moment, his breathing slow. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm done running. Maybe I'll talk to your mom. Be honest for once." My heart ached at the thought of Mom, back home, oblivious to the earthquake shifting beneath our family. "Will you tell her about Diego?" I asked. He sighed. "I have to. She deserves to know who I am. All of it." I reached out, resting a hand on his arm. "I'll be there, Dad, whatever happens." He covered my hand with his, a rare gesture. "I know you will." The next day, we drove to Los Angeles, the city sprawling and chaotic. Javier had invited us to a small art gallery event he was hosting, and I convinced Dad to come. The gallery was a cozy space in Silver Lake, filled with vibrant paintings and eclectic sculptures. Javier greeted us at the door, his smile bright. "Glad you made it," he said, shaking Dad's hand before pulling me into a quick hug. Dad wandered the gallery, studying the art with a curiosity I hadn't seen before. Javier and I walked together, our shoulders brushing as he explained his work. "This one's about finding home," he said, pointing to a painting of a stormy sea with a lighthouse glowing in the distance. "Sometimes you have to get lost to find it." I glanced at Dad, who was listening to a woman explain a sculpture. "I think I get that," I said. As the night went on, Javier and I stole moments to talk, our connection growing with every shared laugh. Dad caught my eye at one point, giving me a thumbs up from across the room. I laughed, shaking my head. Who was this man, and what had he done with my father? Later, as we left the gallery, Javier walked us to our car. "You guys should come back," he said, his eyes on me. "LA's got a lot to offer." "We will," Dad said before I could answer, clapping Javier on the shoulder. "Take care of my boy, all right?" Javier grinned. "Deal." That night, in our last shared bed of the trip, I couldn't sleep. The past week had been a whirlwind. Dad's confessions, meeting Diego, Javier's smile. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something new, something terrifying and beautiful. "Dad," I whispered into the dark, "thank you for all of this." He turned his head, his eyes catching the moonlight. "Thank you, Elliot, for not giving up on me." The next morning, we started the long drive back to San Diego, where I'd catch my flight home. The road felt different now, less like an escape and more like a journey we'd taken together. We stopped at a diner for lunch, and over burgers and fries, Dad asked, "You gonna call that Javier kid?" I smiled, my heart light. "Yeah, I think I will." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. And when you come home, bring him. Your mom'll want to meet him." I laughed. The idea of Mom meeting Javier both thrilling and terrifying. "You think she'll be okay with it?" Dad's face softened. "She loves you. We both do. It'll take time, but we'll get there." As we drove on, the ocean sparkling beside us, I felt a weight lift. This trip had started with a desperate phone call, a father and son divided by silence. Now, as we neared the end, I saw something new. A family not perfect but trying. A father not straight, not gay, but human. And a son who was finally fully seen. The San Diego airport loomed ahead, its glass and steel glinting in the afternoon sun. My flight back to Seattle was in a few hours, but I wasn't ready to leave. Not Dad. Not this fragile new bond we'd built. The truck's engine hummed as we sat in the parking lot, neither of us speaking. Finally, Dad turned to me, his eyes steady. "This trip," he said, "it wasn't just for you. It was for me, too." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know." He reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small, worn photo. It was him and Diego, young and smiling, arms slung around each other on a pier somewhere. "I kept this," he said, "all these years. Thought you should see it." I took the photo, my fingers tracing the faded edges. Dad looked happy, really happy, in a way I'd never seen. "You loved him," I said, not a question. "Yeah," he said softly, "and I love your mom. And you. I'm learning that there's room for all of it." I handed the photo back, my eyes burning. "What now, Dad?" He tucked the photo away, his hands steady. "Now I go home and talk to your mom. Tell her everything. And you go live your life. No running. Okay?" "No running," I promised. We hugged. A real hug. Not the stiff, obligatory kind we'd shared before. As I grabbed my bag and headed into the terminal, I looked back. Dad was still there, leaning against the truck, watching me go. He raised a hand, and I waved back, my heart full. On the flight home, I texted Javier. "Back in Seattle soon. Wanna grab coffee when I visit LA next?" His reply was instant. "Hell yeah. Name the time." When I landed, I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm but curious. "How was the trip, honey?" I hesitated, then said, "It was life-changing. Dad's got some stuff to tell you." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I figured. We'll talk when he gets home." A week later, I got a call from Dad. He'd told Mom everything. Diego, the Navy, the fear that had shaped his life. She'd been shocked, then angry, then quiet. But they were talking, really talking, for the first time in years. "She's coming around," he said, "and she wants you to come home for dinner next month. Bring Javier." I laughed, tears in my eyes. "You got it." A month later, I flew to LA to see Javier. We walked the beach at night, the same one I'd imagined in that first motel room with Dad. His hand found mine and I didn't pull away. "Your dad's something else," he said, his voice soft. "He's trying so hard for you." "Yeah," I said, my heart swelling. "He really is." Back home, dinner with Mom and Dad was awkward at first. Mom hugged Javier, her smile genuine but cautious. Dad grilled steaks, cracking jokes to ease the tension. By the end of the night, we were laughing, sharing stories, a family remade. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed, I thought about the trip, those shared beds, those raw confessions, the way Dad had faced his past so I could face my future. We'd both been running in our own ways from who we were, but now we were here together, no longer afraid. And somewhere, in a box under Dad's bed, was a photo of a young man named Diego, a reminder that love, in all its forms, was worth fighting for.